Okay, I think we are live. Welcome, ladies and gents. I hope you are doing good. It is the 1st of May. Wow, time is just flying. The year is, I don't know where time is going at the moment. Firstly, thank you to everyone who has bought me a coffee. Look, hold on. There is stuff in there. Can you see the steam? Sometimes people say there's nothing in my cup. Here we go. Thank you to everyone who's bought me a coffee over the last month. I just want to say thank you. There's so many people, I can't shout out all of you, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for that. So if you haven't been on the monthly stream before, it's only once a month I do a live stream. It lasts anywhere up to an hour. And I'm really taking all the questions. Sometimes they're complex questions. Other times they're very simple, straightforward questions from the private community. So you can see there's a little banner below there. It's called Patreon. If you would like to join, you are more than welcome. There's no time commitment. And actually today would be the perfect day to join. And then you've got a whole month to see if you like it before the next billing cycle on the 1st of June. So give it a try, see what you think of it. But we are going to go to the questions in a moment. I always like to share something social or whatever with the streams. So this weekend, I actually hiked over Snaefell, which is a mountain here on the island. And I've got to tell you, because I know there's thousands of you who are military or vets, this was one of the hardest treks I've done in a very long time. The people who told me to do the trek were like 80, 90 years old, some of these boys. They said, oh yeah, I did that 30, 40 years ago. Easy, you go over the mountain, you go over the next mountain. Yeah, well, this place now is completely, it's not easy to walk across, let me tell you. So doing that with my pack, 8 miles in, 8 miles out, I am exhausted, but we've got a stream to do. So I've got all the questions here. So these have been asked over the last 3 or 4 days. And I'm going to go through them all now. So let's get started with the first question. And this is from Alex. Do you think that Bitcoin has a chance to become the world reserve currency once matured as an asset class? Increase adoption, legal tender in more countries? So good question there, Alex, actually. And I think the answer to the question is yes and no. Yes, it will be a currency, but would it be the world reserve currency? It's possible, but I think very unlikely. Why? Very simply because the overlords, the banksters, whatever you want to call them, they will never allow it because they can't control Bitcoin. See, that's the problem. They can't control decentralized finance, which is why you're seeing the creation now of CBDC, central bank digital currency, because these are centralized finance. So would it be the world reserve currency? I think it's very unlikely. But will it be a currency like you're seeing in El Salvador? Have had it for a while. There's a couple of other countries that have now adopted it. Now, is it their national currency? No, but it's a currency. And I think you'll probably see that. I think you'll probably see more adoption later on. But I personally, and again, whatever you hear me say on this stream is personal opinion. People get so upset sometimes with what I say because they treat it as if it's a fact, a global fact, when actually everything I say is my personal opinion. So just something to bear in mind. Next question then is from Garrett. Do you think the possibility of a housing market dip is strong enough to merit delaying buying real estate investments? Or is demand still strong enough that a dip won't be that severe? Well, Garrett, I think first and foremost, for everyone watching, it depends on the country. It isn't a one size fits all. And it's not just about the country. It's about the county or the state in the US, the city, the region within the city. Because you know yourself, if you live in a city, you've got the rich area, the poor area, you've got, this area, that area. You've got all different areas. Some areas will have the big mansion houses. Other areas will have the apartments. Some will be nice apartments, some will be run-down apartments. So it really depends. And as I've covered before, you're going to see the smaller the property in the worst area, the bigger the fall. Whereas the bigger the property in the nicer the area and the more expensive, I see you're going to see less of a fall. Why? Why is that? Well, because rich people don't need to sell. And we've seen the evidence of this throughout previous crises and recession. Because they don't need to sell and maybe they bought their property for cash without a mortgage, why would they sell it and take a loss? They wouldn't. But a lot of times normal people, especially in recessions, they might lose their jobs and they'll move from one place to another in order to get a new job and to maintain their standard of living, especially if they're laid off. So in those situations, you have a lot more movement, shall we say, with people, with the job market, especially during recessions. You see a lot of movement. So that's how I see it going. Is there anything else? Yeah, there is. Really, you want to look at the final dominoes then around your region, wherever you are. I have no idea where Garrett is, but it depends on your region. You know, the USA, I would say, is more advanced ahead towards a housing crash than, say, the United Kingdom. Again, why? Because of these dominoes that I talk about. There's 14 dominoes, but basically I usually talk about 7 or 8 of them. And we've seen most of them fall. What we're left with in the USA is inventory. That's it. Inventory. Once inventory hits the market, you're going to see a huge housing market crash. But what will happen first is you'll see a plateau of pricing because Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith down the street, they both put their properties on at the same time. Well, there isn't the level of demand that there was, so one chap lowers his price. The other chap sees he lowers his price. And you see this on a local scale through to a national scale. And this is actually what happens with housing. It drops and drops and drops and drops. And it usually, it might take a couple of years before you see the bottom of a housing market. But what else have we got? Well, if you think about the UK, they have low inventory as well, but they also have very low interest rates. You can still get an interest rate for 1.69% in the UK, fixed for 7 years. I know because I was speaking to a client on Friday who was going to take one out, and he said, should I take the 7-year at X%, or should I take the 10-year at X%? And it was a difficult decision, but we sort of weighed up for him to take the 7-year. So in the UK, you have this as well, which is still keeping not just inventory low, but you're keeping the pricing high because of the low interest rates. So these are things to sort of bear in mind. Now, there's one other thing which you don't hear a lot of people talk about, but you've heard me talk about on the channel, and that is the inflation rate. So if you are a cash buyer for a house, wait, just wait and see what happens over the next year or two. But if you are a mortgage buyer and you're getting a very heavy mortgage on a property, it doesn't really make sense to wait. I mean, it's pretty much 50-50 actually. It doesn't matter which way you look at it, you're about balance. Because if you take a mortgage rate of 2% and the inflation rate is, what is it in the UK? I think it's 7% at the moment in the UK. You've got a 5% spread profit. So however long that inflation rate continues at that rate, whilst you've got a fixed interest rate, inflation is basically eating away at the capital on your mortgage. So in that case, yeah, it's great for you to do it. But what happens if you get then a housing market crash of, say, 20%, 30%, 40%, 2008, if you remember? Well, that 5% spread, you would end up regretting it. So there isn't actually a perfect solution for the housing market, whether to buy or not. But these are just things for you to weigh up personally. Next question then, and this is from Michael. Okay, I do understand and envy the idea of relocating to more rural and less populated areas. However, for those of us stuck in urban metro areas, he's in Los Angeles, in my opinion, what are practical steps or plans for solid preparation if and when things go badly? Well, firstly, Michael, you know what I'm going to say, because I got out of California, if you remember. So those of you who don't know, my wife is from a city called Camarillo, Ventura County. So the whole family just got out. So relatives, everyone sold out at a very good time. So everyone got out and relocated. The first thing I would say is get out of Los Angeles. If you're in Los Angeles, some of you can't, I know, because you're in the film and television industry and things like that. But if you can, I would get out of Los Angeles. It is a ticking time bomb, that city. And this isn't really anything new. I remember a decade ago, people were talking about the, Agenda 2030 and, all the other stuff around it. I think it was Agenda 21 at the time. And California was always on there as one of these zones. I'm not going to talk about too much in this stream, but for those of you who know, it was one of those zones, and it was the main zone. You can look this up if you want to go through those documents. So I wouldn't be in Los Angeles. I think it's a ticking time bomb anyway. I covered it on the water shortage video and how it's going to run out of water. Same with Las Vegas. These two cities, I said I would get out of those two cities. Now, there was one other city I talked about. Someone can drop it in the comments here. And it was where all the semiconductor plants, manufacturers are going to. They are going to eat up all of the water source in that city. And it will come back to me in a moment, that city. But these are things that you've got to think about. Now, if you can't, what would I have? A water filtration, standalone, it's only that big, put it on your kitchen counter. It's an investment, of course, it's not cheap, but I'd have that. And who cares if there's rules that say you're not allowed to collect rainwater? Who cares? I'm not going to follow those rules. Who says, and they say, oh, you can't take water out. See, I wouldn't take water out of a river in Los Angeles anyway, but, what I'm saying to you is it's very difficult. People say to me, oh yeah, but I'm in Southern California, I'm going to store bottled water. You can only store so much bottled water, and then you're going to run out. Trust me on this. I remember when I was a young soldier, actually, one of the lessons I learned, because we always had to carry a lot of water. And I would always say to my sergeant at the time, why are we carrying so much water? It doesn't make sense. And he says, do you know how much, water you drink? And I said, no idea. He went, here we go, here, just take your water bottle then. So we had this black water bottle. Just take that, don't worry, about taking your water, don't worry about it. So I thought, oh, okay. So we ended up not just going for 1 day, but 2 days. I was dying by the second day because I drank this water within the first probably 3 hours. So I had to get, obviously, water from the other guys, and it was a lesson because we then had to do press-ups, and it was a group exercise teaching me a lesson because you all know me, I talk a lot and question things a lot. But yeah, funny story there. But water filtration, food storage, a garden, protection, some sort of protection, whether those are weapons to protect yourself, whether it's martial arts, if you've got those skills, or just buy yourself a Belgian Malinois dog. That's my personal favorite dog. Best guard dogs you'll ever get, apart from a German Shepherd. But why would I go through all of that? Personally, I wouldn't. It doesn't make sense. So what would I do instead? I would just leave. I'd find another place to relocate to. Okay, now Oliver. Hi Neil, how much longer do you think cash, so he's put paper money, will be in circulation as a usable means for paying for things? That's a really interesting question. Even when the CBDC launches, the central bank digital currency, see, in my mind, what I think they're going to do, it's going to be certain countries, because remember, this is the first time this has ever happened. So I think certain countries will launch it first, be an experimental phase. Other countries will be watching and learning from that. But then I kind of think the currency in the bank account, so whatever bank you have and whatever currency you have, I think they'll probably transfer that over into the new credit system. That's what I think they'll do. They'll just do it. And it'll be very quick. It will happen very quickly. But when it comes to the cash aspect, I think they'll probably stop issuing cash. I think that's the most likely outcome because they don't want cash. They can't control cash. And they'll come out with propaganda that only criminals use cash. And you say, well, what about that 80-year-old? And, she gets her pension in cash. And, well, criminals, that's what they'll say. They'll just ignore stuff like that. Criminals, money laundering, black market. This is all the propaganda that will actually come out about cash at the time. So what do I think then? Well, if we look at a time scale, you're probably going to see the CBDC launch anywhere from 2 years to 5 years. 5 years in more developed nations, possibly the USA, but it's hard to know exactly. So if we do that, so that's say 2 to 5 years, I think then cash will run side by side. There'll be a period. It's like when you have, this is a £20 note. This is a new £20 note. I think they call it a polymer note. And I remember that I had a lot of paper notes. And it said, oh, well, you've got to give in your paper notes. And you've got 2 years, for example. And at that point, then those notes, no good, you can't ever, and that's a lie, by the way. When they say, oh, after 2 years, that's it, you can't ever spend it, you can't do anything with it. So it forces people to take it into the bank. Well, the reason it's a lie is because you can always take in old notes to a bank and exchange it. They fill in a form, take the old note, and they give you £20 or whatever the amount is. So it is a lie, it is another trick. Like all banks, they do a lot of tricks. So I that's how I'm sort of seeing this. So maybe it ran for 2 to 4 years. What does that mean? Well, it means you've got between 4 and say 9 years, or let's say 10 years, before cash might be phased out in your country. That's the timeline I would see on it personally, Oliver. Okay, Cheetah. Neil, how do I see the global elites introduce CBDC from our current fiat money system? How do I see the transition? By the way, I haven't moved these questions around as well. I've just put them in the order they've been asked. And it's very interesting how this is going to flow today. Because I had a quick look over the questions, made a couple of notes. And they're all sort of bunched together, so that's great. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to crash the global economy. Now, how will they do that? Various ways. But, I mean, I could think of 10 ways right now. It could be something to do with Russia and China and how they're backing what they might do. Maybe it's a gold-backed yuan, digital yuan. It could be a gold-backed ruble, which is still not a CBDC. You could see the petrodollar just evaporate. You could see people just get rid of their bonds. Countries get rid of their bonds. They get rid of all of those dollars, flood them back to the USA. Inflation would be up 1,000% if that happened. It would be crazy. So I think there's a couple of ways straight away, crashing the economy. But then what would happen? Well, there's different ideas that I've got. One is that the IMF would probably try and do an SDR, special drawing rights. It's like a basket of currencies. That's one option that I think could happen. But I think what's more likely is BIS, the Bank of International Settlements. I think they will probably, because they're the central bank of central banks, I think they will probably try and create some sort of a digital currency. Now, they might not be the first ones. They could watch what everyone else does, and then they come in with their CBDC and sort of, however, maybe there was some sort of a major war globally, or something happened to then implement this CBDC to rule, the one coin to rule them all. I'm a Lord of the Rings geeky fan, as you know. That's probably what I think would happen. Yeah, that's how I see it. Okay, our next question is from Armando. What amount of gold and silver would be ideal to hold? Okay. I've been trying to get my family members to understand the crisis we are in and ones that will emerge soon. They think their money is safe in the banks. What can I do or show them to understand? Firstly, Armando, you can't. You can't. People who are plugged into the system will not unplug from the system. It's like, how can I describe this actually? It's like their nutrients, you know. It's like, it's their comfort blanket. If you think like, no, people will get upset if I use that example. But it is like a comfort blanket for a lot of people. Being able to watch, you know, the politicians, the mainstream media, telling them what to do, telling them everything's fine, you're safe, nothing bad's going to happen to you. You know, a lot of people will not unplug from that because they simply, they can't. They just cannot unplug from that. I don't know the best way to describe it, but a couple of weeks ago, if you look on my videos, you'll see my walk and talk from last Friday, not Friday just gone. It's the one with the water wheel on there. And you know what's interesting about the water wheels, by the way, on the island, is that they all sort of disappeared and all this electricity came in from the mainland. These water wheels were generated so much free electricity. It's unbelievable. Not just here, the Netherlands, so many other countries had this, all these water wheels generating free electricity. Imagine if we still had those today. That's green energy, isn't it? Water, wood, turning the, you know, with the wheels. But yeah, they don't like this, do they? All this free energy. They want to control it all. But yeah, if you watch that video, I talked about the Bastille and how the prisoners that were released wanted to go back in. They didn't want to unplug. They didn't want to see the truth and be responsible. So how, because there's a two-part question there. What amount of gold and silver would be ideal to hold? Well, I think it's however much you feel comfortable with. There isn't a set amount. It depends on each person, but I'd definitely start with some silver. I mean, I have a client who is in a country right now where he's very worried and he wants to get out of the country, but he's got gold. He's like, well, he's got money, but he's got cash in the bank, but he's got some gold as well. So I said, well, just travel with your gold. And he said, well, I think if I cross the border, they're going to confiscate all my gold. So this is something you know, I don't know which country you're in, but these are things that you've got to take into consideration when you're holding physical assets as well. This is why you saw when the Russian sanctions were going on, a lot of Russians were buying cryptocurrency. That's why you saw that spike, because they could transfer it and do everything else with it. So you've really just got to look at all the different asset classes, and you have access to my spreadsheet. You have access to all the breakdowns where I tell you which segment I would be invested into based on the circumstances right now. But yeah, the thing with precious metals is very easy to buy, but it's very difficult to sell. So you've really got to think about if you're going to hold precious metals, what are you going to hold it for? For me, I've got some that's generational. I would pass it on to my kids one day, and that's gold. But I've also got silver. Okay. In fact, here's some gold right here. You see, the gold like this, I would pass on one day. But, or if we ever went back to the Weimar days, where you can transact for property with a gold ounce, I would use it for that. Buy some property or buy some assets. But things like this, so 1 ounce of silver here, this is more for barter and exchange. So I've talked about this as well, where you have certain items that you can barter or exchange if we ever did go into that sort of a situation. Now, if we didn't, who cares? Use those items for yourself or for something else. See, people get really twitchy over this stuff. And they say, oh, conspiracy, preppers, weirdos, and things like that. But yet, they're the ones, the people who used to say, weirdo, because I used to prep and the like. They're the ones that have been coming to me in the last 2 years and asking me for advice, you know? And it will be the same situation. The ones that you've told to stock up on food and things like that, they're the people that are going to be knocking on your door crying, oh, I haven't got any food, I haven't got any this, I haven't got any that. And you say, I told you to go out and get food. And you ridiculed me, you made fun of me. And they say, oh, well, yeah, but can you help? And then you've got to make that tough decision. Now, I know a lot of you watching, you would say, forget them, I'm not going to help them out. But some of you would say, yeah, it's frustrating, I'm going to help them out. It's a difficult situation, you know, with all of this. I went on a tangent, off on a tangent there, didn't I? Okay, let's go to Mike. With the 10-year yield rate going, actually, do you know, Mike, I'm actually going to answer your question privately, and I'm going to answer your question privately. Daniel, hi Neil, what's your prediction for this decade if when we get deflationary burst and central banks do what they do best, print, do you think we will see a repeat of late 70s, early 80s inflationary cycle? In which case, commodities are the way to go. Thanks, Dan. Dan, let me say one thing. A decade, 10 years, some of these economists, like the best economists on the planet right now, they can't even forecast 10 days. Do you remember when I covered the inflationary numbers, the inflation, CPI, and they were saying all that stuff, oh, I'll give back my price, this and that, and I'll quit if I'm wrong. And they were way out. And that was just a few days. So 10 years is very, very difficult to forecast. But yeah, in terms of what you're asking here, 70s, 80s, it's looking that way. It is looking that way. In fact, if you measure the CPI in the same way, we're already there actually. And we haven't got all the energy inputs yet. So this is not looking good. But yeah, based on me expecting more inflation as well, what does that mean? It means energy, food, and commodities, one of those things you've mentioned. This is what does well in times like this. And the best thing is actually farmland. Farmland during the 70s and 80s destroyed every other asset class combined, pretty much. Now people say, oh no, gold and silver performed best. No, okay. So they did perform better than farmland in terms of price rises, but farmland, people were either able to rent the farms to tenant farmers and get an income that way, as well as the value, or they grew crops and sold those crops. So farmland actually did outperform. I'm just clarifying that because everyone gets this wrong. When you see all the economists talk about this, they all get this wrong because they say gold and silver did better, but it actually didn't. Farmland was the number one. It destroyed everything else. And I think we're going to probably see that again this time around. So the answer is diversify. A little bit of everything. Again, look at the spreadsheet, look at my spreadsheet and all my investments, and you can see that. You can see how I'm diversified. So diversify between those asset classes, and you'll see the reasons why and the explanations, and just watch the monthly. By the way, for people that don't know what I'm talking about here, I would recommend joining the community. Even if you just join for a month, you can watch back over all of the videos of me explaining different asset classes, how I would invest based on different times. It's all on there on the Patreon. So I would recommend it. You can look at my spreadsheet and what I've invested into. So yeah, diversify. Okay, we've got Chris next. Energy. Other than the energy sector and uranium, What sectors do you see as opportunistic as we head into the turbulent times in the short, medium, and long term? This one's pretty easy for me. So it's anything food and agriculture. So let's call that agriculture. Mining, because we just haven't got enough raw materials, so mining. And energy. So there's if you're looking for three easy ones: agriculture, mining, energy. Those would be my three, because you've got to think it's all about food and energy. This period that we're in right now is going to end very, very badly for hundreds of millions of people, very badly. We are going to have food shortages. We are going to have famine. We are going to have energy rationing in some countries. This is just the facts. This is the data. People get so upset when I talk about these things, and because it is as if it's a challenge to their entire psychology. But the way I see it is I'm just sharing. See, there's no emotion. There's no emotion with what I'm saying here. These are just numbers. As you know, I've taken a lot of heat over the last 2 years for sharing numbers and statistics. But numbers don't lie. People lie, the media lies, politicians lie, but the numbers don't lie. The numbers are the numbers. And sure, you can manipulate numbers, but even when you've got your opposition giving numbers, right? And to you, like the numbers, what I'm saying is the numbers are what you want to follow all the time. They will not let you down. Oliverio. Hi Neil, what do you think about fixed staking on cryptocurrencies that are more volatile than the average? There are some projects such as AXS, so that's Axie Infinity by the way, that are providing a very interesting APY, 120% return on investment. Okay, now I do know about this simply because I own it as well, but otherwise I would have answered this question privately, but I am aware of this project because I own some. So it's called Axie Infinity. It's a gaming token. I found out about it via some kids that do it, you know, family friends, their kids play it, etc. I found about it by someone else I know in Indonesia. Someone bought a house from playing it, you know, so there's a lot of stuff around it. Now I get 75% APY, if you want to call it that, on mine. 120%, you can only stake 2 units. And if a unit's $30, $32 right now, then that means you can only stake $60 at the 120%. So to me, it's not worth it. So I just put all of my units, and you can do up to $12,000 at the 75%. But let me just clarify. For those of you who are thinking of it, I'd say probably don't. You see, I would only recommend if you've bought into projects and they've crashed down in price, like a lot of crypto, just hold them. If you're getting huge ROIs on it, don't sell it. Remember, you only lose when you sell, and that applies to any asset class. So even on this Axie, I bought it a while ago. I've been staking it very highly, but the price has gone down. I don't really care because I'm going to hold it for as long as I need to hold it. If the price doesn't go back up, I'll make my money from the staking, from the return on investment. Either way, I'll exit at a profit or neutral on it. And that's the way I see it with most investments. I invest very differently to a lot of people in that I take profits on the way up. So if I do really, really well on a project, and I have, some of the projects I've invested in done 700%, I sell it. And people always say, well, why would you do that? Why would you sell it? That doesn't make any sense. Keep it. No, you sell it. And then you look for other projects that are undervalued. You do really good security analysis, fundamental analysis. You find the right projects, and that's it. And you keep working through this. So projects like this Axie, I wouldn't do these sort of things. And it's not just for crypto, it's for anything. Put a very small amount in, a tiny amount, and just do it for fun. But don't treat it as a serious investment, because it's not a serious investment. Maybe the top 5 to 10 crypto coins you could consider as a more serious investment. That's your decision. Okay, that's completely up to you. But something that's like a rank 200 crypto coin, I wouldn't get into it. Not right now, purely because of the sort of cycle we are in. And if all of this goes bad and we have a massive deleveraging in global finance, which is possible, you've got to remember the emerging markets are already defaulting. They're already 4 in 2 weeks. Now we're starting to see a lot of liquidity being drawn out of the markets. You're seeing it already. You're seeing stock markets coming down. You're seeing other asset prices coming down. This could, I'm not saying it is because I don't know, but this could be the drain. And the more it starts to drain, the faster it will go. And then we'll jump on to the hockey stick. So if you ever heard this before, this is where it goes off. So we could be on the hockey stick. We could, I don't know. And I won't know until we are on it, pretty much. No one really will know. I think I covered that. Yeah. So we're going to look at Marco's question next. In your opinion, what is the safest country or region in the world, considering possible future conflicts, financial difficulties, or food insecurities? Now, if you'd have asked me this in 2019, I could have told you straight away, New Zealand. Like, no doubt at all, as a developed nation, no doubt, New Zealand. Now that's sort of way down on my list. I don't really see it in the same way, just because of how plugged in the Prime Minister is with the World Economic Forum and all of the agendas going on. And just the response to everything over the last sort of couple of years. So what would I say now? I mean, New Zealand's still strong, don't get me wrong on that, but it's not as it used to be. Singapore, maybe. They have, what, 1 million standing army or whatever it is right now. I haven't checked it in a long time. But places like Singapore, in fact, that number's probably wrong. Don't quote me on that one. I can't remember what their army, someone drop it in the comments what it is. I mean, they're a very strong country, very safe country. You've got, what, Iceland. Iceland's very strong. And then you start looking at islands. So let me answer this easier. The smaller the island and the greater their GDP, the safer. Many of you have already speculated, and some of you are right. What was one of the reasons I went to the Isle of Man? It is the 5th richest country on the planet by GDP capita. See, most people don't know that. It's a very wealthy country, and it's its own country. It's not part of the UK, like a lot of people think it is. It's not. It's its own jurisdiction. And I was just reading, actually, some of the history of the Isle of Man, because I love histories, I like to go and do all this stuff, like hiking to those mines over the weekend, and I'm still, as you can see, not quite my energetic self, because it destroyed me doing that hike. But like anything historical, when there was World War II, the bombers didn't actually come to the Isle of Man. There was a couple of bombs dropped, but it was more a case of they were flying back and they still had some bombs, and they just dropped them because they saw a little island there. But it wasn't a case of this island was heavily attacked. And you look at patterns of other islands, and they weren't attacked either, smaller islands. So that's the way I often look at it. And that's one of the reasons I'm here, is for safety. And if anything does kick off globally, or major war, I think I've got a pretty good chance of survival here over a lot of other places, especially the UK or America. Not places that I would choose as my first choice personally. So next question is from Lorraine. What's my opinion on premium bonds, and going forward, do I think they'll be safe to hold them? Yeah, I mean, I've never really liked premium bonds, and I'll tell you why. But yes, I think they're pretty safe. They are pretty safe. Premium bonds are, I think they're backed by the government anyway, by the UK government. But I've just never liked them. If you actually look at the interest rate they pay, it's 0, but in terms of prizes and your chance of winning, it's about 1%. It used to be about 1.5%. Now it's about 1%, and that's per year. If I've got inflation at 7%, why would I take 1% on premium bonds? There's a 6% spread there, negative, not positive. I'm losing money in terms of purchasing power. So to me, I wouldn't buy something like that. And also, the thing with premium bonds is they're a little bit of a mystery. And I challenge you to do this. Do a search, go through their entire website, because I had to do it for another client, you see, last year. Do a search and try and find out what happens to that money. Like, how do they invest it? What do they do with it? Try and find out. Good luck, because it's not transparent. There's nothing anywhere about it. You really have to dig into it. And even when you dig into it and you do a Freedom of Information Act request, they still won't give you a lot of the information. It's very loose, like, oh, we invest it into this, we invest it into that. And that's what I'm worried about. You know, and they say, well, it doesn't matter how we invest it, whether it's safe or risky. It doesn't matter because it's backed by the government. Well, governments default all the time. You know, now maybe the UK wouldn't because it's a very strong government, but governments do default. So putting the default to the side, 1% interest, 7% inflation, they're not for me. There's much better things you can put your money into. And in fact, I'll cover it on this week's Patreon video. I will cover where I've got my money, and I get 8% per year fixed rate on that. So I've got some money because I'm diversified, you know, cash and everything else that I've got, metals and crypto and all my asset classes, right? I'll show you where I've got mine that I get 8%. And that's what I would look to do. But I mean, I can't give you, it's not financial advice, but that is what I would look to do with some of your money to diversify it. Okay, Olena. Taking into consideration real estate prices are slowly coming down and rent is going up, do you think investment in rental property is a good idea? A country like Turkey or Bulgaria, for example. You see, when it comes to real estate, I would only invest into countries of strength. So where I thought there was going to be strength in the future or strong positive growth. How did I sort of forecast some of those areas in America this year? Boise was one of the ones I said would be a top performer over the next 2 years when I said that in 2020. Boise, Idaho. And I think it's definitely, I don't know if it's the top one in America, but it's definitely one of them. Why? Why did I talk about Dallas and some other places in Texas? Because you've got to look at where jobs and people are moving to. Follow the money. So you've got a lot of tech going into Texas now from San Francisco. When people move to an area and you've got this amount of supply in terms of housing, and you've got people that are much wealthier and have a larger income, well, they can afford larger houses because they buy not based on the cash value, but on their monthly affordability. So now if I think about countries that you mentioned, Turkey or Bulgaria, I wouldn't invest there because I think there could be conflict there with Russia. And Russia's already cut off the gas supply to Bulgaria. And we mentioned Poland as well this week. But Bulgaria has already had the gas supply cut off. So I wouldn't invest there because once you start having issues with energy, remember, again, this is one of the other lessons we've learned, energy is the input. It affects everything thereafter. Energy is where it causes a lot of the inflation as well. Turkey, hyperinflation, pretty much anyway. I don't know what their exact inflation rate today because I can't track hundreds of countries of their inflation every day, but Turkey is not looking good. So would I invest there? Probably not. unless you're going to invest there for 20, 30 years and just wait and see what happens and see if strength comes back. But I think you're better off just investing into a country that you know is already strong, right? If it's already strong and you can't see any signs that there's going to be a major danger there, okay, maybe they have a blip, but long term they've been strong for a long time, they're going to continue to be strong, I'd invest there. Even though I think the UK is going to have problems, the pound has always been pretty strong. And I don't just mean strong in terms of other currencies. I just mean it's always had that strength. And you've got the British people. Well, again, the culture's changed a lot now. It's not the Britain that I grew up with. Again, I was speaking to some really nice people this morning. And just the most wonderful people, and they're very, very old, right? They're pensioners. And we were just having a chat about history and how things used to be in their day. And one lady, her name's Joan, she's in her 80s, but she 80s or 90s. She's old. I mean, she's very old now. But she was telling me about when she got married just after World War II. So it was 1948 that she got married. And it was just a really interesting conversation to have with her about how she said back in the day you had to work really hard and her husband worked really hard, and she said that culture she doesn't really see it anymore. And the other ladies and the guys were agreeing. They're saying, and they felt like they were living in a time that they didn't really fit in with that time period. You know, they felt alien to the time period now. As if they were from a land that time forgot type thing. It's so fascinating. And that's why I like talking to people who are, people are probably going to say now, Neil, you're insulting us saying we're old. You know, I mean it in a loving, caring way here. I just mean compared to me, who is a lot younger. So yeah, I think that covers that question. I would invest into a country with strength. And for those of you investing into, say, the UK, even though I think we're going to have some issues financially, economically, I think in the future, things will improve again. You know, we will see strength again. And again, you don't buy property for 2 or 3 years. You buy it for 20 or 30 years. So in the long run, things always even out. It just depends whether or not you want to buy in a period of volatility, or you don't really care, you just buy in volatility, and if it goes down, it doesn't matter, it'll go back up within 5 years, 10 years, whatever. I'm holding it for 20 years anyway. The tenant will pay off the mortgage type thing. So these are all things for you to take into consideration. Olga. I have a significant portion of my retirement funds in gold, silver IRA with physical metals. I'm in the USA and concerned about potential gold confiscation. If I take possession of my metals, I'll have to pay taxes at a very high rate, plus 10% for early withdrawal. If I leave the metals where they are, I run into a risk of confiscation. What would you do if you were in my shoes given the trade-offs? Yeah, that's a good one. Well, I would leave the metal where it is because it's already there. You don't want to pay the penalties on the taxes because I'm guessing that you paid it in from your salary without any tax on it. So you don't want to withdraw it because then it will hit a tax liability penalty. And you don't want to lose a 10% penalty for early withdrawal. So I would say leave it, don't take it, just leave it there. Now again, a lot of people are going to not agree with that because there's different mindsets on precious metals. Some people say if you don't hold it, right, you don't own it. And it's certainly true. It is true. But at the same time, if you've got, let's just take an example. Let's say someone's got 50 grand, 50,000 in dollars or pounds worth of gold. I would not take that and keep it at home. It doesn't matter how secretive you are about it, eventually someone's going to find out. And I've heard all sorts of crazy stories from investigators, should I say, so detectives, about golds and precious metals and watches and valuables and antiques. Crazy. From all sorts of things, from people hacking into insurance databases and looking at individual policies and searching for keywords, gold or antique, this, that, finding out the address, doing a home robbery, all sorts of things. You've got to be very, very careful. This is why you don't ever want to tell people if you've got metals, right? But I would have some metals that you store personally. So whether it's silver or some gold, yeah. I won't give you that example, but I do think just keeping some of this so you've got it on hand. So whether that's for barter, whether you need to use it in the future, I think is very important. So I'd have make sure there's an audit though. You see, for my allocated metals, I know there's an audit every night. And that's, every single night there's an audit. Excuse me one moment. So you just got to check your account and make sure the metal is there. But yeah, in a confiscation, look, the government's going to confiscate it no matter what. Even if you've got it at home, they could send thugs round to kick your door in and take your metal. Okay, so last question. Okay, so Rachel's considering opening a Bullion account that I recommend. Okay, based in New Zealand. Yeah, so by the way, ladies and gents, I made a video. You can find it on my channel. You're best off searching for it on the search icon. And it's called A Guide to Allocating Bullion or Gold and Silver, something like that. A Guide to Allocating Precious Metals. And it's got like the thumbnail is some text saying bullion or something. It was a long time ago. It's on my silver investing playlist. I highly recommend you watch that. If you've been on the fence about allocated metals, definitely watch that video. It will explain everything to you, all the risks, the benefits. I would highly recommend that video. But if we do ever have confiscations, I don't really see it being gold that's confiscated. Sorry, let me say it again. If we do have confiscations, it's gold that will be confiscated, but I don't see silver being confiscated. And I've always said that. There are very few records throughout history of silver being confiscated. Now, sure, there's smaller scale. There's, one army attacks another castle in medieval times and all this sort of stuff. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about modern day confiscations. There is very, very little evidence that it's occurred or that it would occur in the future. And you've got to think of it like this. If you're confiscating metal, then there's a big reason for it. Things have gone bad. And you need to back up your currency or shore up your reserves very quickly. What are you going to go for? Silver, which, how many of these for one of these? Is heavy, the weight. And I'm not talking about 1 ounce and 1 ounce here. I'm talking about the weight to equal an ounce of gold in silver. It would be huge. So are they going to send trucks to go and collect silver? No, they're going to go and collect gold and go to vaults or wherever they go to get gold. And that's how I see it. But they have to compensate, and they'll probably compensate you in printed money that's worthless or a central bank digital currency. So yeah, there's definitely a risk. There is. But I would look at silver. If you're going to do allocation, I'd look at silver and make sure it's audited daily. And yes, I personally use Bullion Vault. I'm not recommending them to anyone. It's completely up to you. It's just the one that I use. I have an affiliate link below in the description as well. And I think they give you some free silver if you open an account with them and use my link or whatever. I don't really know because I don't keep an eye on it all. But That's what I use. So yeah, I can't recommend them, but watch that video, see what you think. Again, it's not a sponsored video. It was just me looking into it because no one else had done it, and so many people asked me, would I do it? So that is it, ladies and gents. We are done. It was great to speak with you all. Really appreciate you being online. And again, for those of you, so the link is in the description for the private community. If you want to ask a question next month, you're more than welcome. I will answer questions. And again, I do answer all the questions. If there's ever a couple that I want to answer privately, I'll just message you through Patreon to answer that. But you can ask me a question anyway, if you're tier 3 or above, privately about your situation every month. So thank you so much for being online. I really appreciate you. If you're still watching at this point, then I know you are one of the loyal subscribers. So thanks so much. I really do appreciate you, and all of you who are Patreon members. I can't thank you enough. So yeah, my voice is, you can hear it's a little bit still there, but yeah, thank you so much. Take care. God bless you and your families. I wish nothing but the best for you all and greatest success. So take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.